Bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor! Vă mulțumim că sunteți alături de noi. Ascultați Radio AVFM, Vocea Europei.
Jó estét, hölgyeim és uraim! Köszönjük figyelmüket! Önök az a J4MB Rádió Európa hangja műsorát hallgatják.
And, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to A Voice for Men Radio, the voice of Europe. A Voice for Men is the flagship of the men's rights movement. And this show is probably the only one at this point addressing the issues concerning men and boys at a European level. If you ever thought that there's something wrong regarding the state's approach to men and their issues, this is the best place to start. This is the place where feminism gets to be called out on its lies and propaganda, and the state is invited to get out of people's lives. Please consider visiting avoiceformen.com and see how the truth in action sounds like. We are here and we don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And now, Lucian Valsen shall bring us on today's topic.
And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Valsan broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff broadcasting from the United States. Greetings, gentlemen. How's it going?
Hey, pretty well. How's it going with you?
It's going just fine. I'm having an extremely crowded end of the month with quite a lot of work to do, but other than that, it's just fine, and the weather is becoming more and more friendly. It's been plus 9 degrees today, which is fantastic given the extreme cold we've been enduring for the last 3 weeks. And we're having Mike in the second hour. This is gonna be a fantastic show. I can just feel it.
Yeah, I think we should just get right to it.
Yeah, let's go right to it because it's quite a lengthy news section. James, can you please play the jingle?
You are listening to AVFM Radio, the voice of Europe. This is the news.
Okay, Yot.
All right, the first piece is from the Daily Mail. Quote, time for a well-deserved glass of wine, end quote. Gloating Facebook message of female thug moments after she was spared jail over a shocking belt attack which left a man blinded. A woman who repeatedly punched a man in an unprovoked attack boasted about walking free from court while posting photos on Facebook with a thumbs up. Sophie Sheldon was part of a group of drunk thugs who partially blinded a man in a brutal attack out at a nightclub in Birmingham. CCTV footage shows the 20-year-old leaning over the helpless victim as he lies in agony on the floor, punching him in the face. Her accomplices can also be seen lashing Ismail Benselman, 33, in the face with his belt, destroying his eye. She was handed a suspended sentence of 2 years and a 6-month curfew by Judge Paul Farrer, who said the violent behavior was not in her character. After she was spared jail this week, Sheldon caused outrage by posting celebratory pictures outside court on Facebook. The young woman also uploaded an image of herself grinning and giving the thumbs up in a taxi after her sentencing hearing. She updated her Facebook status saying, quote, guess who's back again? Sophie's back, so tell your friends. After a long old day, glad to be home and put my feet up and have a well-deserved glass of wine. Mr. Ismail was attacked by Simon Evans, 30, and Jack Gargam, 26, after he left a nightclub at 6 a.m. on January 26 last year. The group began arguing with him over a taxi, Birmingham Crown Court heard. Footage shows Mr. Benselman trying to run away. He was chased and took off his belt to protect himself, but Evans grabbed it and hit him with it. The tip of the belt caught him in his left eye, leaving it permanently blinded. Gargam also began raining down heavy blows. When the victim was on the ground, Sheldon joined in. Evans from Bromford was jailed 4 years and 6 months after pleading guilty to causing GBH with intent. Gargam from Rubery was sentenced to 4 years and 5 months after being found guilty of the same charge. Sheldon, who works in a beauty salon, was spared jail after the court heard that hours before the attack, her estranged mother had committed suicide after a row with her. The young woman from Gwent, South Wales, who delivered at least 4 punches and a kick to Mr. Benselman while wearing high heels, pleaded guilty to causing grievous bodily harm with intent and was given a 2-year suspended sentence with a 6-month curfew. Sentencing, Judge Paul Farrer said, quote, "It is plain you acted out of character against a very particular background. Unwisely you went to, in effect, drown your sorrows. The violence you used was minimal. You did not intend to cause serious injury. You are hard-working, have potential, and are well thought of. It is very likely you will never offend in the future and allows me to take an exceptional course." End quote. A victim, however, said a Facebook post suggested she felt no remorse, adding he did not understand the British justice system, quote, at all. Yesterday, Mr. Ismails from Sparkbrook in Birmingham said, quote, "She is not even human. She has shown no remorse. How would she feel if this happened to her or to someone she cared about? I thought I was going to die. It was absolutely terrifying. These people showed no mercy. They were so aggressive. I'm totally depressed. I can't work and I can't drive." The 33-year-old continued, quote, "She was the one who was causing all of the trouble in the first place, and she has not even gone to jail. I do not understand this British justice system at all. I am pleased the men have been jailed, but I would have liked them to have been given more years in prison. No amount of time in prison or compensation could ever replace my eye. It has changed me forever." Mr. Ismail, who has been in the UK for 5 years, has already had 5 operations and is due to undergo a 6th operation at the end of January. His brother Armani bin Salman, 40, from Liverpool, added, quote, "He's a completely different person now." And the article continues after that, but that's all we have time for.
Yeah, but the rest of it is essentially even more of the same. Standard. I mean, is anyone really surprised?
Oh, her mother committed suicide and so on. Yeah, I mean, okay, but that doesn't mean they can just go and punch people or kick people. What sort of justification is that? Or hit them with the belt in their eyes and blind them and... that wasn't actually her. That was one of the men.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she only kicked it, yes. But still, I mean... and it's an estranged mother, so essentially it's not like it was the life of yourself. I mean, it's not like the parent that's been there for you for your entire bloody life, and then suddenly you have to witness something like that, and it traumatizes you. I'm not buying that. I'm just not buying it. Yeah, and again, even if it were true, go ahead.
Yeah, and if having this sort of very emotional situation causes you to just lash out like that and kick people and punch people and so on, then you're clearly a dangerous person, and you shouldn't just be let off without any serious punishment. I mean, yes. What sort of message does it send?
Well, it sends that if you have the right sex, you can do whatever the heck you want. And again, I mean, if you're so depressed and whatnot, what the fuck are you doing at 6 a.m. in a nightclub? Just saying. I mean, aren't you supposed to do something about your depression, which doesn't involve nightclubs? Just saying. I mean, I know that when I go through something like this, definitely I'm not in a nightclub. You know? I mean... This is not the first case, not the last one, but I picked it so we can get a better transition towards the next one. And the next one is quite interesting, especially when it starts right from the title with how interesting it is. So essentially, whilst these cases are taking place, the feminists in Britain write articles such as this one from the Telegraph. Are men natural-born criminals? The prison numbers don't lie. There are 84,731 people in prison in Britain, and according to the latest figures, 80,915 of them are men. Less than 5% of this country's prison population is female, and the trend is similar elsewhere in the Western world. In France, it's about 3%, in Germany just under 6%. The global median is 4.3% according to figures from the International Center for Prison Studies. You can find all sorts of trends by analyzing the demographics of the prison population that might tell us something about the groups most likely to offend, at least at a level warranting incarceration. But perhaps the most striking and persistent is that serious crime is still overwhelmingly committed by men. The discrepancy is not quite so stark when looking at lower-level crimes, because when women do participate in crime, they tend to commit less serious offenses. But the gap still exists at all levels. In 2011, men accounted for about 3/4 of all criminal court cases and out-of-court disposals, warning, cautions, and so on. So how can we explain this? The factors most commonly thought to contribute to crime: a lack of education, half of prisoners have no qualifications compared with 15% of the general population, experiences of violence or abuse as a child, 41% of prisoners witnessed domestic violence as a child and almost a third experienced abuse, financial difficulties, and so on, but these affect men and women alike. Yet from pickpocketing to white-collar crime to assault, men are more likely to offend than women. For a long time, this phenomenon was overlooked. Criminological research in theory focused almost exclusively on men without explicitly questioning why the gap existed. But as feminist theorists started demanding a closer look at such differences, the crime gap rose to light. And from the 1970s onwards, various explanations were presented. Today, although there is still no universally accepted explanation, most criminologists point to socialized gender roles and the different expectations of male and female behavior. Okay, jumping a few paragraphs. Some people have, of course, argued that it is biological rather than sociological, that men are naturally more violent, for example, or that they're stronger and therefore more capable of committing some crimes. These assumptions might explain why it took so long for anyone to question the different level of crime among men and women. But as Heidenson points out, most crimes are not violent in nature and can't be put down to physical differences. The most common crimes in the UK are motoring offences. Men do tend to take more risks, according to many studies, which could be relevant, although whether that's an innate or socialized difference is difficult to tell. More on that later. Could it be that women commit more crime than it appears, but are simply better at getting away with it? One idea, the so-called chivalry theory, holds that paternalistic judges and authority figures are more lenient on female offenders, explaining the lower number of women behind bars. The evidence on this is complex and contradictory. There is a competing view that judges are sometimes harsher on women because criminal behavior deviates further from what it is expected from them. Jumping another few paragraphs, but gender bias can work both ways depending on various factors: the nature of the crime, the appearance and behavior of the defendant, particular attitudes of the judge and jury, and is more or less impossible to measure. Either way, it can be only a partial explanation, since regardless of sentencing, men are involved in 3 times as many criminal cases in the UK as women. The influencing factor in the past was thought to be a difference in opportunities. Women face discrimination, quote, in both the legitimate and illegitimate worlds, end quote, as Heidenson puts it. They are less likely to hold senior positions in financial companies where there are opportunities to commit embezzlement, for example, and similarly, the world of organized crime tends to be very male-dominated, operating on strictly traditional gender roles, where women tend to take domestic, sexual, or caregiving roles rather than being directly involved in the gang's operations. By the way, the Italian mafia might disagree with that. But anyway, jumping a few more paragraphs, if the crime gap can, at least partially, be explained by socialized gender roles and responsibility, could this knowledge be incorporated into rehabilitation programs? Is it time to avoid hypermasculinity? Professor Heidenson has argued this in the past. Quote, many remedies for young offenders are about boot camps and militarization, end of quote, itself a kind of hypermasculinity. Quote, in the teeth of all the evidence that military discipline is actually associated with high levels of indiscipline, really? Anyway, there's a great degree of domestic violence and abuse of alcohol and so on in armies the world over. Instead, she suggests, quote, why don't we learn something from the successful sisters of young offenders? They tend to be much more conformist. Why don't we look at how that is achieved, end of quote. Some rehabilitation programs are beginning to address this head-on. I like this name. The Man Up program, which was first trialed in 2013, takes small groups of men in prisons, young offenders institutions, and in the wider community, and encourages them to explore the concepts of masculinity and identity. Safe Ground and Charity behind Man Up notes that through their extensive experience of working with young men in custody, quote, our understanding is that the idea of masculinity can hinder personal development and growth, leading to negative outcomes, end of quote. Charlie Weinberg, executive director of Safe Ground, tells me that the program is, quote, designed to offer a space in which men and of different ages can, often for the first time, really think through the impact of cultural and social norms around male attitudes and behaviors on their lives and relationships. For many men, the pressure to be seen as, for example, strong, brave, and hard makes it very difficult to ever back down or admit fear or reluctance in many situations. Men who take part in the Man Up are much more able to identify the kinds of limits and boundaries set on them as men. They work together and to redefine themselves and to create new ways of allowing themselves to be in the world, end of quote. But even when it isn't explicitly acknowledged by the offender, re-evaluating the concept of masculinity may be a key part of breaking the cycle of crime. Robertson notes that the arts, which are used in many hugely successful rehabilitation programs run in the UK prisons, are essentially a way of achieving this. Quote, painting, drawing, writing poems, and so on, they're about helping people to come to terms with their feelings, about being able to express things appropriately, about being able to communicate, about listening to others and understanding. It helps to dismantle or get a perspective on some of those macho stereotypes and assumptions, some of those very male behaviors that are associated with crime, end of quote. In her 2013 essay, The Longest War, historian and feminist writer Rebecca Solnit wrote about how the one factor that overwhelmingly connects violent crimes, that the perpetrators are male, is so often overlooked. Instead, we hear that American men commit murder-suicides at a rate of about 12 a week because the economy is bad, though they also do it when the economy is good. Or that those men in India murdered the bus rider because the poor resent the rich, while other rapes in India are explained by how the rich exploit the poor. The pandemic of violence always gets explained as anything but gender, anything but what would seem to be the broadest explanatory pattern of all. It's rare that anyone says what this medical study does, even if in the driest way possible. Being male has been identified as a risk factor for violent criminal behavior. What she writes equally applies to nonviolent crimes. This is not to say that men are inherently more criminal, neither it is to deny the very real effect of other risk factors such as age, education, and background have on offenders. But it is important to recognize one of the most universal and yet frequently overlooked trends in crime. If we can properly work out why the crime gender gap exists, why women are so much likely to stay away from it, we might be able to use that knowledge to tackle the cycles of criminality more effectively. One thing I just have to say. So, this article starts by saying that, well, there are 8,915 men in prison in Britain. That's like 0.003% of the total British male population. Meanwhile, the number of whores or prostitutes in Britain is something around 80,000 or 81,000. That's also roughly 0.003% of the total British female population. So if the title of this is Are Men Natural-Born Criminals, then the numbers don't lie. Maybe we should start writing an article, Are Women Natural-Born Whores? I mean, the numbers don't lie, don't they? Ian?
Yeah, I mean, essentially the title is the one big problem I have with this article. Otherwise, I think it's pretty decent and like one of the best feminist articles I've read in a long, long time. But I mean, basically the title commits a very fundamental logical fallacy that they're basically equating all A are B with all B are A, which is very different. For example, all presidents of France so far have been men. That doesn't mean that all men have been presidents of France. A completely different thing. So it's true that most natural-born criminals are men, but most men are not naturally born criminals. But of course, authors on websites like the Telegraph probably don't get to choose their own title, so it's probably a choice from the editorial board and not from the author herself, so we shouldn't really blame her for that.
Yes, but then again, the problem with this article, the multiple problems, is that it completely downplays the what she calls the chivalry theory. Okay, fair enough. But it downplays it way too much, and then comes up with the quite astonishingly coming with examples from India, the same India where the Indian Commission for Women, nonetheless, a feminist organization, just 4 weeks ago came up with a report saying that at least 55% of the rape cases in India are utter nonsense, and the quote-unquote victims are lying through their teeth. So I wouldn't use India as an example to make my case if I were a feminist. Just saying. I mean, do these people even follow politics of their own interest?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even if 55% of the claims are false, that's still it's still overwhelmingly men who commit rape. So I don't think that really works for discredit the article too much.
Yes, but it does weaken the case. I mean, because presumably she used the example of India for shock value, except the shock value has been diluting quite gradually over time as more revelations have occurred. But yes, overwhelmingly, and I also don't buy this argument. Oh, but the fact that most criminals are male is overlooked. I don't think so. If it had
I don't think it's overlooked either.
If it had been so overlooked, I mean, we would see countries building 40 or 50% of their prisons to be female prisons and whatnot. But this is not happening. I don't think the fact is overlooked. Not at all.
Yeah, I don't really think it's overlooked either. But it is sort of something that should be pointed out, and that unfortunately, to my great chagrin, some MRAs tend to just completely deny this overwhelming fact that men are just naturally much more prone to commit crimes, violent or otherwise. I mean, sure, there's a sentencing disparity, there's bias and so on, but that narrows the gap down from 20 to 1 to 10 to 1 or 5 to 1, or maybe even a bit lower than that. But you can't explain the whole gap just through biased judges and so on. It's just completely. It's just completely unreasonable to just say that there's no evidence that the men are more criminal than women. It's just people who say that are just incredibly biased and
or ignorant. Yes.
Yeah, well, they just take they take this very biased perspective that they apply this completely different standard for this claim that men are violent. And it's of course true we don't know the exact rates at which men are more violent than women, or there's a lot of uncertainty, as there always is with social science. But if you don't want to accept this sort of finding, then you can basically just throw out the whole of sociology and not accept anything that anyone tells you about pretty much anything. And unless those people denying the greater male criminality do that too, then they're just being unreasonable and inconsistent.
Yeah, fair enough. Although, to be fair, the social sciences have made quite a lot of discrediting themselves. But yes, overall I agree with you. Although I would also point it out that yeah, definitely the judges' biases and whatnot definitely do not explain everything. Although, for instance, here she says, "Oh, but first we hear that they commit it when the economy is bad, but though they also do it when the economy is good." Yes, but they do it at a far lower rate, don't they? A fact that she definitely knows about it, but formulates the sentence to such an extent that it seems that it's not the case. So yeah. Overall, it's not really a bad article. Although, again, I just have to give props to the author for avoiding to be an utter cunt. I mean, seriously, I'm not joking. I'm not joking at all. I mean, I could just already imagine this article written by another Jessica, just not Abrahams, but Jessica Valenti. I mean, think about it, how this article would have been written by Jessica Valenti. So credit where it's due. I'm not joking. I'm not joking at all. Yeah, but it's I guess my main problem with it is just it doesn't refer only to one feminist scholar, and it's terribly one-sided. And again, if such reasoning is okay, then I guess we could extend it to other areas. The example that I gave with the same number of people being in the whore industry, most of them being women, or we can extend it to, I don't know, blacks, or in the case of Britain, Muslims, and so on. So, and if that were to be done, I guess the fembots would be up in arms and crying whatever. What's the latest? It's not racism, it's Islamophobia or whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that we should be able to honestly explore all these issues, whether it's about men or about women or about Muslims or blacks or whatever group you want to take. And there's, of course, this sort of great double standard here, that there's a handful of groups about which you can still say those things, and men are one of them. Mm-hmm. But most sort of populations are now under the sort of umbrella of politically correct protection, and but the problem I have is that a lot of people in the MRM, they want to pull men also under this umbrella of politically correct protection, but I think you just take away the umbrella and allow everyone to be criticized.
Yes. I would rather pull more people outside of the umbrella, or as you said, just take down the umbrella, shut it down, and let's be honest a bit. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, we'll definitely talk a bit more about this in future shows, especially on the one on tribalism that you're preparing. So yeah, let's go to the next one.
Okay, this one is from Die Welt. And it's titled, quote, "Men Need Help," end quote. Lagging behind in school and overrepresented in prisons. Lower life expectancy, more depression. Things aren't going well for the male sex. At least as compared to the other half of the population. One is tempted to ask who deserves the appellation, quote, "weaker sex," unquote. In the FDP, at any rate, FDP is the Liberal Party, basically a classical Liberal Party. In the FDP, at any rate, emancipation politicians recently faced this question. Since then, they've demanded a radical turn, away from the one-sided focus on women's advancement toward even-handed support for both sexes. What follows is a conversation with Susanne Schneider, spokeswoman on emancipation politics for the Landtag faction of the FDP, about true gender equality. Interviewer: Ms. Schneider, do you pity today's men? Pity would be too strong a word, but I see that there are many situations in which men could use male-specific support through politics and research, similar to what women have already enjoyed for decades, but this support does not exist. But after all, it's women who overwhelmingly become victims of domestic violence and who don't manage the re-entry into the labor market after a parenting break. That's borne out by the statistics, but I'm not arguing for an end to support for women, but rather for building up support for the other half of humanity. Where is the need greatest? When it comes to health, according to the Robert Koch Institute, the life expectancy of men is 5.5 years below that of women, which is overwhelmingly not caused by genetics. And 3/4 of all people who commit suicide in Germany are men. That is unacceptable. What is the liberal master plan? There isn't one. I'll begin with suicide rates. Men have to be increasingly encouraged to consciously deal with depression. According to the Stiftung Männergesundheit, suicide among men is usually the result of untreated depression. Women seek professional help more quickly when they feel depressed. I'm skipping a few paragraphs. The fundamental answer is this. The great transformation process, which we've been celebrating as emancipation for decades, has been almost exclusively conducted in regard to women by the Social Democrats and Greens, almost as if the Social Democratic and Green politicians still lived in the 80s. Women are helped in picking up new role models and becoming emancipated, which is very good, but the men also need equal rights is ignored. Men seem to be in need of help starting from a young age. Even among special needs pupils and school dropouts, boys dominate. Yes, even in elementary school, boys are more likely than girls to display behavioral problems, not to speak of worse grades. A government which supposedly is interested in gender equality cannot accept this. What concrete steps should be taken? It should the government take? It should advertise to try to get more men to work in nurseries, elementary schools and secondary schools. The state mustn't continue only initiating information events like the Girls' Day to get girls interested in supposedly male jobs. There must also be support for information events for boys, such as the regular Boys' Days, where boys are introduced to supposedly female jobs like childcare work in an unprejudiced way. Excuse me? For years, the FDP has scoffed that the Greens want to dictate how people live their lives. And now the FDP wants to foist women's jobs on young men? We're not foisting anything on anyone. We just want to establish the conditions under which young men can decide for or against a particular vocational path, free of any prejudices. That's exactly how the Greens argue. No, the Greens want equal results. We want equal opportunities. Whatever. But the male teachers increase the scholarly success of boys hasn't been proven. To develop in an emotionally stable way, pupils need female and male role models. Men tend to communicate differently, and in many cases they also see pupils a bit differently from women. When male teachers become a rarity in nurseries, primary schools, and even in secondary schools, that's especially problematic for boys. If boys prefer becoming technicians rather than childcare workers, and girls would rather become childcare workers than technicians, don't you just have to accept that? Of course, but you have to make sure that all young people can decide freely, including boys. But that's what the state government doesn't get, because it more or less equates emancipation with women's advancement. How do you determine that? There are numerous state-supported competence centers, offices and initiatives for women, but no counterparts for men. Even the equality commissioners must by law be women. Why? We demand that men too should be able to fill this office. That's one way in which local male-specific disadvantages can be revealed more easily. On top of that, the Ministry of Emancipation needs a department for men's policy. There is a department for homosexual, bisexual and transsexual men. But what about the majority of heterosexual men who are not represented by this department? For that matter, the Ministry of Family, too, is a department for fathers. The Social Democrats and Greens loudly propagate a new image of fatherhood, according to which men should detach from their exclusive fixation on work and integrate themselves more with the family. That's nice, but then you also have to give support to fathers. How is that supposed to work without an institutional reinforcement of this topic? This date is long overdue for men's policies.
Interesting.
Very interesting indeed. I mean,
I enjoyed that portion of, oh, you're arguing just like the Greens. No, we don't want equal results. I love that portion because it just puts, I don't know how it's in English. It puts the dot on the I. It's just it's a different vision. And I like that.
Well, I'm actually not so sure about that because I'm really ambivalent about what this woman is saying. On the one hand, it's really great that politicians are finally starting to pick up men's issues, but the way she phrases all of those things makes me very worried. Because the thing about equality of opportunity is that it's a very loose sort of term that can mean all sorts of things.
Yes.
I mean, opportunities are unequal if, I don't know, people have a different amount of wealth or a different amount of education and so on. So with this equality of opportunity language, you can justify all sorts of things. And
and we don't have any guarantee that the FDP views equality of opportunity in the negative rights fashion, i.e., the state shouldn't intervene and pick up winners and losers.
Yeah, and we already know that this is not what they mean, at least not strictly, because she's talking about setting up all sorts of departments for men and so on, and state-sponsored events where boys can learn about female typical jobs and so on. So,
which I think it would be an utter waste of resources. For the simple reason that I'm not convinced that 15, 16-year-old boys would be very, very happy to go to such events. They would rather consider them utter tosh and refuse to go. It's just the way. I mean, think about it yourself. When you were a teenager, would you go to such an event? I definitely would have never gone to such an event.
Yeah, I think how it works now with the Girls' Day is that the girls basically get a day off of school, so that's basically the incentive to go to that thing.
Yeah, but that's an incentive. That's a way to guarantee that maybe some students will come, but it's not a guarantee that those students will give a damn about your event.
Yeah, definitely.
And 1 day off school, that's not really such a big incentive. You can get 1 day off school by just convincing your doctor to write you something that you were sick that day and whatnot. Or convince your parents to call. I mean, come on, seriously, it's not a huge incentive. Maybe if it had been an entire week, then now we're talking.
Yeah, but I mean, the Girls' Day is just 1 day where you go to this thing.
Yeah, and it's not like you get 1 day off to do whatever the fuck you want. You get 1 day off to go to a boring event. Possibly even more boring than the school itself.
Yeah, and this sort of underlines a great fear I have, is that that once this men's rights movement gains some more steam and some more respectability, that men are just going to be yet another special interest group, and we just get to play this whole divide and conquer game with yet another group that also has to get its special privileges, and that we're just moving further and further away from actual equality and just have some special offices for men to sort of counter the special things that women get, and in the end this is going to be one big mess. And that's the sort of the problem that we face. It's this Sunny Schneider person. She says, she doesn't want to take away any of the programs that are for women and so on. It just wants to add on new programs. But the programs that exist for women are the problem. At least a big part of the problem.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get time to discuss this with Mike as well, because he also has quite a similar provision within his manifesto, and we're definitely going to ask him about this.
And don't forget, this is the Liberal Party, So they're basically the party that is least in favor of state intervention and so on. Once the Social Democrats or the Greens or whatever get their hands on this, it's going to be much worse than that.
Yep. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay, this one is also from Germany, at least from a German source, from the Wirtschaftswoche. Fearful Generation Y. Many young women shy away from leadership roles. Tough women, on the contrary. Especially young women don't think they're cut out for leadership, as a study reveals. Only 29% would like to have a job with a leadership role. Again and again, the generation of people born between 1980 and 2000 is measured and examined. Most recently, the consulting firm Universum, the INSEAD Emerging Markets Institute, and the HEAD Foundation took a look at the so-called Generation Y. They surveyed 16,000 students and young professionals in 42 countries for their millennial study. The results sound familiar. Work-life balance over high salaries, overtime compensation is important. But they also speak of ambition. Young people can well imagine being boss one day. The under 30-year-olds are, quote, ambitious and want to, quote, shape their own career. But this seems to only go for young men. Apparently, young women don't have enough self-confidence for top positions. That's at least what the Deloitte Millennials Survey 2015 shows. Only 29% of female respondents said they wanted a leadership position, while among men that number is 46%. With a total of 37% of potential future bosses, Germany has one of the lowest ranks internationally. In the emerging markets, on the other hand, 65% of the younger generation wants to achieve a leadership position. That's the highest value worldwide. From the point of view of the authors of the study, this might be because of employers who don't sufficiently motivate women. Quote, young talents are ready to take on responsibility if firms give them the opportunity, says Nikolai Anderson, partner and head of innovation with Deloitte. Firms therefore should create space for young talents to show their abilities, says Anderson.
Firms should do what?
They create space for. The German word is Gestaltungsraum schaffen. I have no idea how to translate that, and I don't know. Basically, they should create a space where young people can create things or
like a startup hub,
form things or whatever.
Something like
where they have some sort of
hub.
Yeah, I don't know if that's exactly what he means, but
why? I mean,
I don't get it either.
If they're not interested, then they're not interested. Why should anyone, not just firms, anyone, the state, the whatever, why should they try to make them interested? I mean, why?
Yeah, that is a big problem. There's this whole egalitarian approach that things should be equal, and if they're not, then it's a big problem. And if the statistic, whatever it is 46% for men and 23% for women, then that's a catastrophe. And yeah, something must be done.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I take the same view the other way around. I mean, surely there is a problem when you have places such as Ireland where there is an overt policy to avoid employing men in caregiving roles. Now, surely that should be scrapped. But if at the end of the day men in caregiving roles will still be 5%, then so be it. I mean, if they're not interested, then they're not interested.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe there's particular jobs where there's beneficial effects for having more equal representation. Like maybe, for example, it is good for pupils if they have male teachers as well as female teachers. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the case, but if that is the case, then I think that individual schools should have the ability to hire male teachers preferentially. sort of to take care of that gap, and some schools will not do that, and we'll just see what works better, and that is one way of working this out. But I don't think that you should have this sort of one-size-fits-all approach where the state comes in and says, we need a quota of X%, and if that quota isn't fulfilled, then you get these sanctions. That's just, I think, a completely wrong approach.
Yeah, speaking of quotas, here's the last article for this news section, because Mike is already waiting outside. Coming from the BBC, Barroso used blackmail to get more female commissioners. The former president of the European Commission says he used blackmail to persuade members to put forward female candidates as commissioners. José Manuel Durão Barroso was speaking in a jovial mood to a mainly female audience at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He said he told prime ministers their country would get fewer important commissioner roles unless they proposed a woman for the job. I needed women, he said. A third of commissioners must be female. Mr. Barroso said his intervention worked. That's the power of the president of commission, to choose the portfolio. He outlined the punishment awaiting those who did not take the hint. If a country proposed a man instead of offering them oversight of financial markets, competition, energy, or economic affairs, he would offer them a less important position such as sport. Gordon Brown was one prime minister he had to persuade to propose a woman instead of a man. Pressure that resulted in Baroness Ashton becoming trade commissioner. By the way, Baroness Ashton is by far the most incompetent individual who have ever served in the European Commission in the entire history. Just saying. Anyway, back to the article. I told Gordon Brown I need a woman because I will not make my quota, he said, before stressing that Miss Ashton was a very talented candidate and did not get the job just because of her gender, which is false. Mr. Barroso was part of a panel of speakers discussing a report examining why there were so few women in parliaments around the world. On average, the report said just 1 in 5 elected politicians are men. Rwanda was a notable exception, as its parliament has a majority of female MPs. And in the rest of it is just tiny inside jokes between Barroso and Gordon Brown. And then, so anyway, yeah. This is the result of quotas. How many examples Go ahead.
So what doesn't surprise me at all is that people in the executive are willing to resort to these kinds of tactics and put pressure here and basically blackmail people or but what does surprise me is that he's admitting to that openly. He doesn't even try to hide it.
Why would you try to hide it? I mean, you're the only Maoist who has ever succeeded in Europe. If you could do that...
Well, former Maoist.
Yeah, but he never distanced himself from those days. I mean, he was asked repeatedly to either distance himself or condemn that period, and he refused to do it. Last time it was, I think it was Nick Clegg, I think is the name of the MEP in the last legislature, who pressured him to acknowledge that period and distance himself from it. And as a result, Barroso himself asked the president of the European Parliament to exclude Nick Clegg from the meetings, and Nick Clegg was excluded for something like almost a year. And given various fines. I'm not joking. Look it up. It's a matter of public record. So no, I'm not buying this former Maoist thing. Well, if you're a former Maoist, why the fuck are you excluding people who try to ask you about your Maoist period? I mean, he could have just said, well, the days back in the time were different, and I was young and more naive, and I was a student and whatnot, and now I no longer believe in that and whatnot. He could have said just that. I mean, I would still poke fun at him, but it definitely would have been a better treatment than to try to exclude people who reminded him of his past. Just saying. Seriously, look it up. I mean, I'm not joking. I think it was Nick Clegg, the name of the MEP. But just look, MEP questions Barroso on Maoism, and you'll find it. Admittedly, you won't find it in very friendly websites, but then they all cite the original ec.europa.eu documents, so at least those are definitely legit. Okay, with that being said, let's take a short music break and try to bring Mike into the show. Brutal Whiskers Uznik, or Prisoner, from the Russian death metal band and from the album Fallen World, released in 2013. So Brutal Whiskers Uznik. And we're back. We've been listening to the Russian metal band Brutal Whiskers, a great song, Uznik, from their 2013 album. We're into the second portion of the show, and we're joined now by Mike Buchanan, president of the political party Justice for Men and Boys. Hi there, Mike.
Yes, hi, Lucian. Sorry, Val. Yeah, Lucian, yeah.
Yes, and we've... last week, on the last episode of Voice of Europe, we've read a long piece by Vice attacking viciously the positions of Mike's political party. Justice for Men and Boys is due to stand in this general elections in Britain in May this year. So I've prepared a little set of questions for Mike, and some of those questions were essentially driven by the criticism posted by Vice. So essentially, we want to bring the other side of the story. It's been a while since you've been on this show. It's been over a year, isn't it, Mike?
A year, yes,
Yeah.
I have to say I wasn't aware of the Vice. I mean, there's been so many things attacking us that it's difficult to keep up with them. But I'm pleased that Vice did something. So thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be in the center of attention, and who is to say? I mean, I take it as that there is no such thing as negative publicity.
Exactly.
So anyway, let's go straight into it. First, I have a small set of questions about the policies of Justice for Men and Boys. I mean, not just Vice, but also BuzzFeed and a few other places.
Yeah.
To them, by far, the most controversial policy you stand on is the one on abortion. The gender ideologues have accused you that you want to ban abortion and take away women's reproductive rights. So as an asshole that I am, and trying to look up for the truth, I went into your manifesto, and I've seen that you propose reducing the window in which abortion on demand should be allowed from 24 weeks till 13 weeks. That's in the 6th page. And you specifically mentioned that the Abortion Act of 1967 should remain unchanged with regards to the provisions pertaining to the grounds of reducing pregnant women's risk of injury and other physical health issues. Now, that's not really so extremist. I mean, this is the law in Austria, in Finland, in Denmark, and several other European nations. I mean, not even, taking the example of Denmark, not even the Danish feminists say that women are oppressed by this law in Denmark. So why all the fuss? I mean, why did they take such an issue with your stance on abortion?
Well, it's interesting, Lucian. As you know, I haven't had a chance to look at the Vice one yet, but we've had very little, certainly that's come to my attention, very little pushback on the abortion front. And I think there's probably two reasons for that. I think our proposals would be considered reasonable by the majority of people in the UK. And so, for example, we point out in the manifesto that the limit is currently 24 weeks. And because medicine has progressed so much since the 1967 Abortion Act, we today have what is to us the morally indefensible position that in the same hospital on the same day, you can have one medical team trying to save the life of a 24-year-old fetus and increasingly often succeeding, while in another operating theatre, a medical team is killing a 24-year-old fetus, and that is sorry,
24 months, not 24 year.
I'm sorry, 24 weeks. 24 weeks. Yeah. Yes. And to us that is just the most extraordinary thing, and in some ways, I know there are people who within the sort of men's rights community that aren't keen on us talking about abortion, but in some ways, the more we explore it, we're starting to think that it could be the number one male human rights issue. It is also, of course, an issue for girls, but for females. But it's a big one, I think, for males. And by the time of the election, we're expecting that, I think the figure is 8.2 million fetuses will have been terminated. I hate that euphemism, by the way. Terminated since the 1967 Abortion Act. But we haven't. Vice, I say, I don't know about. But in general, we've had very, very little mention of it. And I suspect it's because our enemies do not want to draw attention to the manifesto.
I see.
So,
I
almost all the. We've been attacked right across the political spectrum in terms of in terms of the media, and I think their number one intention is to dissuade people. Well, they kind of have to talk about us now because BuzzFeed News 10 days ago did a piece which had 146,000 hits in one day, and I was on ITV within, I think, 16 hours or something the next morning, and we had of course the Guardian, Independent, Mirror, you name it. It was the mainstream media breakthrough that we've been dreaming of for quite some time now. But even in the Telegraph, I mean if I look at these things and I say what is the intention of the article? The intention is to stop people exploring us, but we had on the day of the BuzzFeed piece we had 15,000 hits, and I'm sure AVFM get that and more, but goodness me, J4MB hasn't hit those levels before, and thousands of those, I think 3,000 or 4,000 of those downloaded the manifesto, and we've probably had 15 or 20,000 downloads of the manifesto since. So the mainstream media, these people are trying to sort of quash interest in us, but we've had a stratospheric rise in people visiting the site.
Yeah,
I don't think they're trying to quash interest in you. That wouldn't really make sense. I mean, surely they can't be that stupid. They just think it's an interesting topic and a sort of thing where they can spark outrage. And if that helps you as well, that I don't think they're concerned with that too much. I mean, maybe it's even good for them if you get more publicity, because then they can get more outraged.
No, it's an interesting point, and something, of course, that we always talk about, not always, but a problem that the men's rights movement has is income, getting income. And a few media people have said that in the last 9 or 10 days, the mainstream media for the first time thinks it can make money out of men's rights, which I guess ties in with what you just said. So even if, it's a bizarre thing. So even if men's rights activists themselves cannot monetize what they're doing, the mainstream media can. And it's a kind of toxic dance, I guess, that we're going to have with the mainstream media. But if it drives people to AVFM, J4MB, and all the other sites, it's great. I mean, it's 10 days ago we couldn't have dreamed of this.
Yeah, well, it's essentially free dissemination. That's why I started this interview with there is no such thing as bad publicity at this point. No. So I guess I read the very few sources where they actually were outraged with regards to your stance on abortion. Then I'm not going to spend too much time on this and go to the Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. This is a thing with regards to which I genuinely don't have any opinion. But according to The Independent, FAS, Fetal Alcohol Syndrome, can cause retarded growth, facial abnormalities, and intellectual impairment. And The Independent says this, reporting on a landmark case commenced in late 2014 that is still taking place. The BBC says that 1% of babies born in Britain annually suffer from some form of FAS, and even voices within the Labour Party, mind you, suggest that legislative action should be taken to curb the phenomenon. Bill Esterson, from a Labour MP, recently introduced such a bill. From the manifesto on page 8, I see that J4MB proposes criminal prosecution for mothers who give birth to children suffering from FAS and incarceration if found guilty. Now, that's certainly harsher than the Labour's proposal. But please tell us just how serious the issue of FAS is in the United Kingdom. And if your proposal were to ever to become a law, what will it happen to the children?
Okay. The 1% figure in Britain is an interesting one, Lucian. It's the same. I discovered off Wikipedia that the figure is in the United States is similar, and fetal alcohol syndrome or the impact on fetuses' brains of alcohol is the number one cause of mental incapacitation in human beings. It is a huge thing, and the British government, I don't know about outside the UK, but the British government recommends no alcohol intake for pregnant mothers. But the case that came to light recently was a woman who was drinking, I think it was 8 cans of strong lager a day and half a bottle of vodka a day. And she very clearly knew that there was a serious risk. Otherwise, the test case wouldn't have been brought on behalf of the unfortunate child that was born to her. But basically, the law in Britain, and I'd be surprised if it was very different in too many other places. It is not illegal for a woman to get a pregnant woman to get blind drunk every day, even if she knows that the results could be, lifetime mental incapacitation. It is such a violation of a life. Now, if any man did, somehow did that damage to a fetus, he'd be in prison, and I guess he wouldn't emerge. But because it's a woman, it's as in so many areas to do with the criminal law, women are above the law. And in fact, another thing we have, it's a bit of a tangent, but William Collins, an important British blogger, did a piece where he showed that if male criminals were sentenced in the same way that female criminals were, 5 out of 6 men in British jails wouldn't be there. And I know people have done similar calculations in the US. It might even be worse in the US. I don't know. But no, this is. Our position is basically that that drinking alcohol to a serious extent whilst pregnant is nothing less than grievous bodily harm against the unborn, and women should be punished accordingly. And the sentence for grievous bodily harm is up to, I think, 15 or 16 years.
Mm-hmm. So if this, if the view of J4MB were to become a law, what will it happen to the children? And this is a serious question. I mean, supposedly in such a case, you imprison the mother with a sentence of, I don't know, let's say 10, not the minimum, not the maximum. Who will raise the child? Presumably the father is dead. Who will raise the child? Is it better to have the child brought up by the state or by some foster care family than by the mother, even if the mother had been drinking during the pregnancy? Is it a better idea?
Well, two things really. I'm not sure why you would think the father would be dead. But
I'm just taking a hypothesis.
I see. Sorry, Lucian. Yes, no, I understand. Well, the case that came to court, the mother wasn't, as I understand it, wasn't looking after the child, who I think is, I'm not sure the age. I think 5 or 6. So the mother isn't. So, and I would be surprised if in not a lot, I would expect in a lot of cases, the mother would not be looking after the child. So it falls on the state anyway, sadly.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But the issue is, it's one of deterrence. How at the moment, what does a health worker say to a pregnant woman who gets blind drunk every day? She tells her this. This is a serious risk, and the woman carries on anyway. And I guess the woman might ask, well, if the worst comes to the worst, am I going to be imprisoned or charged or something? And the health worker today can say, no, you are above the law. But if the health worker was able to say, if your child is born with fetal alcohol syndrome, you could spend 10 to 16 years in jail. Do you not think that would kind of have a deterrent effect?
Yeah, probably it would. Yeah. So you're saying essentially, let some stick besides the carrot exist somewhere in the law. As a deterrent, as you put it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Okay.
Here there is no carrot, Lucian. It is just, what carrot is there? Appealing to the better nature of a woman who's.
Yeah, essentially that's the carrot. I mean, the NHS says don't drink whilst being pregnant.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the carrot, but there is no stick to it and there's no enforcement on it.
No.
So yeah. Anyway, let's go further. On the issue of fatherlessness, your manifesto thoroughly and convincingly, at least to me, covers the issue and why is it a problem. As proposals to tackle it, on page 14, you say that the state should no longer encourage fatherless families by subsidizing sperm banks. Okay. That the state should abolish the disincentives for men to marry that are currently in place. Okay, that sounds reasonable. But then you propose a tax deduction scheme that would allegedly encourage stay-at-home parenting. Now, I can see the moral argument for that. I don't think many people would dispute that having a parent stay at home, whether it's the mother or the father, is definitely a better idea than having them put through huge, long days of childcare since the age of 3. I can definitely see the argument for that. But why do you think it will work? And I'm asking this because a similar arrangement has been the norm in France until last year, and it didn't prevent a breakdown of the family. Why do you think this will work, or it will curb the phenomenon in Britain?
I think it's just one of a number of policy directions that are required. It will work for some families. It may not even work for many, but it is, it's to do with, encouraging stay-at-home parenting, which there's just a mountain of evidence to show that's better for children. But the state in the UK, and again, I can't talk about outside the UK, but the state in the UK operates taxation policies with the intention of driving people and women in particular into more paid employment than they would do without those tax disincentives. And in fact, a conservative minister not 3 or 4 months ago stated proudly that under the current Conservative-led coalition, the number of women in paid employment is at an all-time high. This is a Conservative minister. The Conservatives today are as anti-family as Labour.
Yeah, and what you're describing as the current status quo in Britain has been introduced in France last year. Although I have to give props. At least your manifesto proposes a way of choosing between 2 or 3 different schemes, which one suits better for the individual family, which is definitely better than the French solution, which essentially said from now on we're not going to encourage stay-at-home parents, but we'll rather penalize parents who choose to stay at home, which is, I guess, a solution that's definitely even far less desirable. Anyway, going further, on education, you say that the organization called Campaign for Real Education, their proposals should be implemented in full, and the option of all boys schools with all male teaching staffs introduced for those communities that want them. That's from your manifesto, page 17. From this, I understand you'd want such units to exist on a voluntary basis and not top-down dictated from Westminster. But why are they a good idea? And why should they be funded by the states? Also, is the private sector allowed to build such schools today in the UK? Or are they banned on some grounds of equalities or whatnot?
Okay. Well, why would they be a good idea? Because boys do better academically in a predominantly male environment with male teachers. Why should they be funded by the state? Well, because half of our children are male. That's the answer to that. Is the private sector allowed to build such schools? Yes. The proportion of male teachers in the private sector, we call them public schools, as you may know. Talk about Eton and Harrow and so on. The proportion of male teachers in those schools is substantially higher than in state schools. In state schools today, I think it's 64% of secondary school teachers are female. It was 42%, I think, just 30 years ago. And it's one of the reasons that the public school sector is so popular with parents, because they if you like have teaching methods that I guess left-leaning state schools would see as old-fashioned and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, so essentially they do exist as a private, and you would like to see that model implemented a bit more in the state sector as well.
As an option. In fact, some of the people are often surprised, Lucian, that we have female supporters and donors, but we actually have a fair number, and probably the second biggest group of female supporters are those with sons, in the state education system, and they see them horrendously disadvantaged compared to the girls, and they just see their life chances just being so damaged,
jeopardized, definitely.
Yeah, yes. Very angry. So today 3 out of 6. 3 out of 6. People going into university. Sorry, 3 out of 5 are women. Of course, it was a problem when 3 and 5 were men, but now mysteriously 3 and 5 women isn't a problem.
I see. Yeah, well, this thing with the unisex education is probably going to become a topic even further, not just within the non-feminist community, but in the society at large, considering the fact that more and more evidence has resurfaced that there is a case to be made, not just for boys, but also for girls, apparently.
Indeed.
That girls are also doing slightly better if they're in an all-girls school. I don't have a definite opinion on it, but definitely I can agree that such choices should exist and shouldn't be just outright dismissed because whatever, they're old-fashioned or whatnot. Oh, the feminist police has been hearing me. Anyway, going further on domestic violence or interpartner violence, you propose in the page 30 that the government should make it a legal requirement for refugees to house parents along with their children under 16. I guess this proposal comes to tackle the current situation where boys as young as 12 are deprived from any shelter when fleeing from an abusive parent. Maybe it's a dumb question, but why 16? Why not 18? I mean, is a 17-year-old running from an abusive parent more suitable to resist outside on his own, or her own, than a 15-year-old?
It's a very fair question. I guess you have to draw the line somewhere, and yes, you could make a case that it be 18. But equally, why stop at 18? I guess there's 19-year-olds being abused by parents, aren't there?
But the thing is, along with their children, and the child, in my book, is 18 or less. Yeah. That's why I asked why not 18. I mean, definitely the current. I mean, even if your proposal would be implemented, it will definitely be an improvement as opposed to the current status quo. Where I heard from Erin Pitty that boys as young as 12 or 11 are banned from entering an IPV shelter because they're boys. I find that preposterous.
It is brutal. Just brutal.
Especially considering that those shelters are receiving public funding. I mean, if they were entirely privately funded, okay, their rules, whatever. But when it's public funding involved, I don't know. Okay, let's go to the... this one will be quite interesting. I've looked through the Sexual Offences Act of 2013, and I found something interesting in Section 1. You've told me in the past that it's not such a big deal, but most countries don't have this system of law, so maybe you'll explain it. The Sexual Offences Act of 2013, Section 1, defines rape as, quote, a person A commits an offense if A, he intentionally penetrates the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person B with his penis, B, the person B does not consent to the penetration, and C, the person A does not reasonably believe that person B consents. Now, I would regard this as a quite narrow definition. Does J4MB seek to change this definition to include more instances, or is the British law a little bit more complicated than I'm reading into it?
Yes, it's a bit more complicated. I mean, there are, of course, other categories of sexual offence. So, for example, rather than a penis, an object being used. But the 2003 Act was very much developed along radical feminist lines. So for example, just from what you've just said, Lucian, only a man can rape. There is, in British law, a woman cannot rape. And while
not just a woman cannot rape, but also a man if uses a separate object is also not rape. I mean, this definition is quite preposterous.
Okay, but the thing we'd like to see is an equivalence in the law between rape, between rape by a man of a woman and a male being made to penetrate, and we have it's actually the whole area of sexual abuse by women of men and children is I think it's 7 pages long. It's one of the longest sections in the manifesto, and the reason it's so long is that we really wanted to sort of tease apart all the various issues here, and it is just such a misunderstood area. And we gave about 3 pages to an American government survey, the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, which basically asks questions which, in the UK at least, no survey asks of men and women. And it comes up with some fairly astonishing things. So, for example, if we look at female victims of rape, I mean, I'll round up or down to the nearest 100,000 here. But in the United States, in a particular year, I think 3 or 4 years ago, 1.9 million women were raped by men, and 1.6 million men were made to penetrate women. And even in the in the UK, those two offences are regarded by the crime oh gosh, I can't remember, by the CPS, but the prosecution service. Those in their guidance are regarded as equivalents. So they actually say in their guidance, which again we have it all in the manifesto, but they say they are equivalent crimes, and yet the maximum sentence for a man convicted of rape is life, a life sentence, and for a woman convicted of making a man penetrate her, 10 years. Mm-hmm. Again, mm-hmm. it's just one of countless areas where.
So essentially, the crimes are equivalent, but the punishments rendered to them are not equivalent.
Exactly.
Which makes sense exactly not at all, but anyway.
Yeah. So it's called a different name, it's treated differently, but they're the same somehow on some ethereal plane.
Yeah.
Here's something that really struck me. I saw it in your manifesto on page 41. Some estimates, I'm quoting from your manifesto here, some estimates indicate that 30 to 40% of the London sex trade is made up of men, and many homeless men expose themselves to risk of sexually transmitted diseases when they're forced to sell their bodies for money or shelter, end of quote. Now, 30 to 40%, that's quite a lot. I mean, the London sex trade is quite a huge industry. So that's quite a lot. I mean, can you please elaborate on this? I see that you cite places such as homeless.org and insidehousing.co.uk. Yet this thing is not mentioned almost at all in the mainstream media. What's going on in there?
Well, you're right. It is hardly mentioned. What's going on, I guess, is that males are subhuman, and so who would be interested in the fact that 30 to 40% of prostitutes in London are men?
I mean, it's an astonishingly high number, and once in a while, or something like once in 3 months, we'll hear the Guardianista column talking about the huge oppression of female sex workers in the London sex trade, which I think some of it may be legit, but most of it I think it's severely blown out of proportion. But I have to be honest that this really struck me. I mean, 40%, that's a lot.
It is, I can't say that we spent weeks and weeks researching it, but when we did look into it, the estimates did tend to be in that kind of order. It is a very high figure.
Okay. No, well, this is the kind of thing that I would like to see more often in the mainstream media, seriously, and researched more thoroughly. Maybe it's not that high, but still, I would like to see more research on this.
Yeah.
On the criminal justice systems, the proposal of J4MB on page 51 are as equitable as they can be, at least in my opinion. However, time and time again, we see that the judiciary has little to no intention to actually become more equitable. On the contrary, the culture surrounding the topic seems to have become even more misandric than it was, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. Just in this radio show, we read in the news section an article claiming that men are natural-born criminals, which we discussed that it's quite a clickbait title, and it's not really that bad of an article. But anyway, meanwhile, the judges are more and more often advised to practice leniency when it comes to female criminals. Why is there such resistance of treating people equally under the law? I mean, yes, I can understand slightly more crime or significantly more crime is perpetrated by men than by women, okay, but that doesn't preclude the fact that people should be treated equally under the law, doesn't it?
I agree totally. Again, in the manifesto, we have a link to an amazing piece by William Collins on this. The piece where he says 5 out of 6 men in British prisons wouldn't be there if they were, if men were sentenced in the same way that women are. But I think men, commit the sort of serious crimes that could lead to prison something like 3 times more often than women. And yet there are 20 times more men in British prisons than women. And there was an infamous report, the Corsten report, a few years ago, which was basically calling for the closure of women's prisons and for women to be in rehabilitation, to spend time in rehabilitation centres near their homes. And I don't know if it's that report or a later report said that these women should be, apart from the most violent, should be allowed to go home at night. So the entire system is basically says that the way to treat men is brutally, and the way to treat women is with compassion. It is an extraordinary double standard. But even to this day, the judiciary is predominantly male, but there is a public feeling in Britain, I hate to say it, that prisons are easy places. But male prisons in particular are just appalling. The lack of investment in these places, it makes me so mad. In fact, there was a case in a prison last summer where it got so hot that a male prisoner gouged both his eyes out as a protest, and something like 75%, I think it is, of prisoners, I don't know, but certainly male prisoners, I don't know about the female prisoners, have two or more personality disorders. Also, very high levels of illiteracy and innumeracy. And I guess you could say that these brutal regimes might have some sense if they're effective, but they're not. The rates of recidivism, of returning to prison, are just unbelievable. I mean, something like a third, I think, of prisoners return to prison within 12 or 16 months.
A third. Well, let me put that in a little bit of a context. I mean, it's not significantly higher or lower than other European nations. I mean, something like a third is in France as well. Sweden has a slightly lower, something like 25%. But then again, Sweden is a phenomenon in and of itself. So I'm not convinced a fair comparison.
No.
Could be done with Sweden.
I remember seeing a piece on Norwegian, and the investment per prisoner is just, I mean, how much more it is than in Britain? It must be several times more.
Something like 7 times bigger, yes.
Yes, I can totally believe it. But the relapse rate was just so much lower. It was really quite extraordinary.
Yes, but then again, the Norwegian state can afford, given that it has very few prisoners and a state budget bigger than Britain.
True.
So
that's true.
So yes, of course they can afford it. Let's be a little bit realistic in here.
Yeah.
Although you've made an interesting point with regards to the male dominance in the judiciary. In here, in my country, the judiciary is strongly female dominated. Something like 70% of judges are women, and from the prosecutors is something more equitable, something like 55-45. But also the clerks who do the indictments and whatnot are also something like 75% to 80% women. And the thing that I see as constantly in a country like this, where women dominate the judiciary, surprisingly or not, there's slightly less gynocentrism than it is in countries where more men are in the judiciary. I mean, I couldn't see a celebrity such as Alexandra Stan, who I hear is quite famous, more so outside of the country than in here. I couldn't see such a celebrity losing a domestic violence case in a British court. Yet in here, the facts mattered a slightly more than her feelings, and she lost the case.
Right.
So I hate to say it, but maybe the key is to bring more women in the judiciary in this one. Okay, let's go to the paternity fraud issue. Now, in here, there's quite a long-standing disagreement between you and I. I stand for not making paternity tests mandatory for all births. You want to have them mandatory at all births. But regardless of that, in your manifesto, you say that the state should only require a man to have financial responsibility for a child if he's previously signed a legal declaration that he's willing to support a child who results from the sexual relationship in question, and the paternity test has proven him to be the child's biological father. End of quote. This is from page 54 in your manifesto. Now, this essentially means legal parental surrender or financial abortion, as the Danish legal scholars have put it. Now, is that a fair thing to do? And can you please qualify what, in your view, should be the time frame in which the man should choose to sign or not to sign the legal declaration of willingness to support the child resulted from the sexual relationship?
I'm not sure there need be any time frame. At the end of the day, consent to sex is not consent to fatherhood. I mean, this is an area where women have a lot of rights and no responsibilities, and men have no rights and a lot of responsibilities. So it is just, we really shouldn't be surprised that paternity fraud is so common. I mean, two forms of paternity fraud. Obviously, the frustration of contraceptive methods, and particularly failing to take the pill, and so deceiving a man, if you like, that way, but also persuading a man, or just letting him believe he's a father of a child, biological father of a child, when he isn't. And the question is, how to deter such behaviour? Because again, at the moment, there is no deterrence in law for women to do this. The state just does not pursue women for parental fraud. Men have to take out private actions. Even if they've had several children who turn out not to be his, he supported them for 20 years. If he's lucky, he might get £20,000, and for compensation, not for his investment in the children, but for emotional distress. And those cases are so rare; they make it into the national media. I mean, there might be 2 or 3 a year, but basically on a very widespread basis, women are committing paternity fraud, and the state does absolutely nothing. Yes, it's an astonishing infringement of human rights. But it is. I've got to say, it's one that people do. Even men struggle to get their heads around. It's just accepted that women do this, and men pick up the tab.
Yes, but I guess, I can certainly understand the last portion of the proposal, essentially don't enforce child support until you have beyond all reasonable doubt that the child actually is the biological offspring of that man you want to handle down a child support order to. Now, I can totally understand that and fully agree, but the part of willing to sign a legal declaration, I see it as essentially financial abortion or legal parental surrender. And that's where I'm probing into. I mean, what is the time frame? Should the man be expected to sign that form within the first 5 months of pregnancy, or whenever he wants? That's essentially where I'm.
Whenever he wants. I think the point is that contraception is so reliable today, and women have so many options, that a man shouldn't be financially responsible for a child unless he's agreed to be so in advance. It's really, to me, it's as black and white as that. I know it's not to others, but to me, it's pretty black and white.
I see. Okay, then let's take a music break, and we'll be back with questions regarding media reaction, press treatment, and some practical questions. For the music break, let's listen to some Swedish song from the Swedish rock band Tequila Sunrise. A very telling song called A Crime to Be a Man. So Tequila Sunrise, why is it a crime to be a man?
Can't believe, even if it's been 3 years. it a crime to be a man?
And we're back. We've listened to Tequila Sunrise, A Crime to Be a Man. Very nice Swedish rock band. I suggest you all to Google them and listen to some more of their songs. By the way, the founder of the band is one of the contributing editors of AVFM Sweden. We're back into the last portion of the show here with Mike Buchanan, the president of Justice for Men and Boys political party, standing for general elections this May in the United Kingdom. So let's talk a bit about the media reaction and press treatment. We've talked in the beginning of this interview of clickholes such as BuzzFeed and Vice, who have reacted with utter contempt to the news that your party will be standing for the general elections. But what I found funny is that the Vice piece, written by some Eleanor Morgan, whatever, she quotes Ali Fogg to make her case against you, citing an article written by Fogg in 2013 on what I'd like to call the People's Republic of Free From Thought blogs, the notorious Atheism Plus hub. Meanwhile, you also cite Ali Fogg several times, at least 4 from what I counted in your manifesto, and you even recommend him in the recommended books and blogs section, alongside with the atheist video blogger Thunderfoot, Gamergate commentator Sargon of Akkad, and another left-leaning non-feminist, that is Glenn Poole. So how come? I mean, are you more willing to give credit where it's due, even to your critics, than the other way around?
Yeah, I suspect that's true. I mean, while I disagree with both Ali and Glenn on their politics and their positions on feminism, I think both have made some very good contributions to the debate around men's human rights. Yeah, I mean, you know, I really don't care where people are on the political spectrum. If they make an interesting contribution, then I'll include them. I mean, some of Ali's pieces on areas like sexual abuse, I think, were really outstanding, including a piece that we include on the whole feminist narrative that men can't be forced to penetrate women, and it's some I'd say just outstanding stuff. I mean, Ali's a very, very bright guy. I just think he's wrong on so many things, but he's a very bright guy, and I see no reason not to include him. I mean, I'm hoping that at some point soon he's going to try and tear apart our manifesto. I look forward to that, but he hasn't so far, and it's kind of been notable that we haven't really seen much of the sort of the heavyweights attack us in that area, apart from B. Campbell a couple of days ago. You know, they've all been fairly minor figures, really. Anyway, but no, I don't see any reason not to include people just because I disagree with their politics. I mean, to me, there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah, but then again, you're not a feminist. I mean, if you if you read the Vice piece of Eleanor Morgan, yeah, even where she agrees with you, for instance, on the issue of male genital mutilation, she would rather discredit everything in the position just because you're not in her camp.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I think you read the piece.
No, I haven't yet, but I certainly shall after this. But no, I mean, I've never tried to hide my anti-feminism right from the outset, Lucian, as you know. But I think the position of being a men's rights activist and being a non-feminist is bizarre, you know. And of course, I mean, there are. I mean, both Ali Fogg and Glenn Poole will admit that some people regard them as feminists, and I'm not sure. But to me, it's an odd position to be a men's rights advocate and not denounce feminism for the evil ideology that it is.
I see. Yeah, although to be fair, Glenn Poole has written in the past a very nice article of why I left the left and feminism. A very outstanding article. I recommend it to you.
Right.
So yeah, with Glenn Poole is extremely difficult to assess. Anyway, let's go further to the next one. Last time you came to this show, it's been more than a year. It was in 2013. You've told me that you've generally been given fair treatment by some media venues, particularly BBC Radio. Has that treatment improved over time, or has it gotten worse? What is the general evolution of media treatment?
I think the big thing was the BuzzFeed News piece about 9 or 10 days ago, which had 146,000 hits in one day, and it led to the whole mainstream media interest. But I go back to the point that across the political spectrum, people have basically sort of lied about us. They've invented things in the manifesto which just don't exist, and then they go and criticize the lies they've just made up. But
that's a straw man right there.
Yeah, but it's also getting of late, maybe because it is mainstream media, it's becoming far more. I'm getting more in the way of personal attacks. I gave a series of media interviews in Canary Wharf just a couple of days ago, and it's quite clear that that they really want to attack me on the most bizarre things. For example, that I'm divorced twice, and so that doesn't make me so because of that I shouldn't stand up for fathers who can't see their kids, for men who are beaten by their wives, for men who suffer genital mutilation. It is just crazy. But also, I mean, something just came up in one of them where the guy said, some people are saying online that you're gay, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd not heard that one before, and it's just like I was honestly I was speechless for a few seconds, and I thought, well, even if I were, what does that matter? I mean, some MRAs are gay. God knows what the proportion is. I don't think anyone's ever even tried to work it out. I mean, who'd be interested? But even if I mean, that's just naked homophobia as far as I'm concerned. The idea that if I were gay, I shouldn't talk about these things. It's just it's really quite bizarre. I was even asked where on the Kinsey scale of sexuality I was between zero being complete heterosexual, 100% heterosexual, and 6 being 100% homosexual. And I said 0. And that kind of, I guess, that ended that line of questioning, really. But just bizarre. No, they really are. They cannot engage with the manifesto because it is just so. In my view, I mean, it's 80 pages. It's very robust. We must have close to 300 references there to all sorts of studies and whatever else. And
that would be real work, Mike. I mean, even if you disagree with the manifesto, it would imply real work to read through it and then thoroughly debunk it. Do you expect fembots to actually do real work? Come on.
Well, I know, but the sheer laziness is really quite extraordinary. So, for example, one of them, I don't remember which, said that we want women barred from corporate boardrooms, and I thought, what? Where does this stuff come from? And I guess where that came from was that that we oppose positive discrimination for women in going into boardrooms because there's so much evidence which says that when you artificially increase the proportion of women on boards, corporate performance declines. And God, if I had a pound for every time I said that, I'd be living in the south of France right now. But it is just the most extraordinary misrepresentation. But you wonder how many readers say, "Oh, this man's crazy. I'm not going to explore this," and how many think, "Do they really say that? I want to, I'd like to check that for myself." And of course, when they do, they find that the media is lying.
Yeah, well, I guess it would. That's how I divide the public in my mind. When the media comes up and says something that's obviously a lie to me, it's usually half of the public doesn't give a shit. And from the remaining half, 4 out of 5 would rather believe the media, especially if it's something that creates shock. For instance, this man wants to ban women in corporate boards. And one of the remaining half, so essentially 10% of the whole public, would rather check it from themselves and say, wait a minute, did he really say that? Well, let's see. Oh, he didn't. And then the questions start. And that's why I say there is no such thing as negative publicity, because we as non-feminists, we essentially aim for that 10% of the public, which might maybe even less than that. That's my optimistic estimation. Essentially, we aim to that particular demographic who tends to be quite skeptical and would rather look it up and see for themselves. And once they realize they've been lied, the people who are essentially brought up to be skeptics like that would start asking the questions: what else have I been lied about?
Exactly.
And then and once you go down that road, I know from experience you can never come back. What is seen cannot be unseen. Anyway,
there is, Lucian, the most extraordinary double standards. I mean, this won't be any surprise to anybody listening to this. But sometimes it can take your breath away. Now, on Monday morning, I was on BBC Radio Berkshire, and I'd been told the night before that I'd be debating with Beatrix Campbell, who is what it has been for 30 years probably one of the world's most prominent radical feminists, a Marxist lesbian, but it turned out that I was given, I think, 6 minutes or so to talk about this and that. For some reason, he alighted on the issue in something I'd written about how there is strong in-group preference among women when it comes to recruiting and promoting staff.
Which is true to a certain extent.
Well, it certainly is, but I'd never been challenged on it before, so I was a little bit surprised. But I said, well, it's well known, and they said, well, can you name me the studies that show this? And I thought. Right. Well, I mean, I was sort of, I was left saying, well, there are thousands of reports and studies underlining our work. I really cannot pull out of my hat every study. But then I said, look, if you go to Steve Moxon's excellent book, The Woman Racket, you'll find a number in there. It is just very well known that women have this in-group preference and men don't, despite the glass ceiling myth. But he kept on pressing on it, and it was really quite an extraordinary thing. It was such a peripheral issue in the grand scheme. But anyway, so then I was taken off air, and 2 seconds later, B. Campbell comes on, and the presenter, who was a man, I should have said to her, well, what do you have to say to refute all that Mike is saying in his manifesto and elsewhere? And she replied, and I tried to stifle a laugh there, but I couldn't. And she replied, well, it's nonsense, of course. You only have to look at the evidence. And then he carried on with other. I thought, what? I mean, my jaw hit the desk. I thought, that's it. I was given this sort of lighted matchsticks under the thumbnails over one little area, and she can just say, well, the evidence proves he's wrong, and it just the ship was sailed. But that happens all the time. The double standard. I mean, however long you work in this area, it just sometimes takes your breath away. Sorry, I probably talked too long about that particular issue, but I was just
not a problem. Not a problem, because it can it makes me easier to go into the next question, which is about your little debate with Caroline Criado Perez on ITV.
Oh, that was a happy moment.
Well, Miss Perez is a vile woman indeed, and the lying cunt on top of that. And I have to say this, I just can't let that unsaid. Anyway, that clip showed me that it is possible to spew more lies per minute than José Manuel Barroso, the former president of the European Commission. I have to say I thought that's impossible, but Ms. Perez was there to prove me wrong entirely. But a disheartening amount of people do believe the lies of the likes of Ms. Perez, and also the lies of the feminists against whom you've debated on TV and you've mentioned right earlier. Do you see the tide, any of that tide turning even just a little bit amongst the public, not amongst the media this time? I'm asking you.
No, definitely, it is definitely turning. I mean, something that must have. There's a paper in the UK I used to subscribe to, the Telegraph, and it was just, it was the quality right of centre paper, and I must have subscribed to it for 20 or 25 years. But in recent years, it's just become appalling. And there were two hatchet jobs against me and the party in the last week or two. But the responses, on the online versions, the support was overwhelmingly for our positions, and people were really attacking the journalists who'd printed this garbage. I've noticed, and others have noticed, that over the last two years in particular, the comment streams on such articles, more and more, men and women are just taking, are just not taking this nonsense. I mean, 2 years ago, feminists would kind of like crawl all over things, but these days it's quite the opposite. A feminist comes out with something outrageous as a comment, and she's just hounded out the building. It's an incredible thing, and you can't help but think. I mean, just to go back to the earlier point, I think this is good. This is, the people who are running these publications aren't stupid, and they will be seeing that that there are a lot of these comments. In the case of some of them, they had 60 or 70 upvotes, and they will be realizing, Luchan, that there is money to be made here. That there is such a huge number of people today that have had enough of feminist narratives, and somehow money can be made out of all these people. I don't think any of us know quite how at the moment, but they must see the tide turning. To go back to your point about the tide, it is turning, and both men and women have had enough of the lies.
Yeah, so essentially you're saying it will be a matter, sooner rather than later, it will be a matter of capitalist reality that yes. They'll have to change the message. Okay, I sort of see how that can be achieved, although I'm not convinced at all it will be achieved in the next 2 years, but it's definitely feasible. Anyway, for all the UK listeners out there who either listen to us now live or will be listening in the podcast format, please tell us the exact areas in which Justice for Men and Boys will have a candidate on the ballot. Okay, well,
we're contesting 3 adjacent, extremely marginal seats near Nottingham, which is an important town in central England. The first one is Broxtowe, currently held by a Conservative MP, Anna Soubry, and Ray Barry will stand for us in that seat, and he's the leader of Real Fathers for Justice. I'll be standing in Ashfield, which is the seat of a Labour MP, Gloria De Piero, who's the Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. Now, she fought the seat for the first time in 2010, and she damn near lost it to a Liberal Democrat rival, getting only 192 more votes than he did. So that is just, it's probably in the top, 9 or 10 marginal constituencies in the country. And then finally, the third one, Sherwood, Mark Spencer is a Conservative MP there, and Ian Young will be standing for us. He's a survivor of domestic violence and who's spoken of his experiences on BBC Radio. So three people who know, some of the darker areas of men's experiences.
Yeah, fair enough. And I'm looking forward for the debates in your constituencies in particular, because I'm sure your Labour opponent, the incumbent, will have to answer to some very difficult questions. I'm looking forward for that. Also, on the same note, the BuzzFeed piece says that you're pessimistic about winning enough votes to retain any of the deposits you've put down, a sentiment which I know you used to have a year ago. So I guess my question is, why so pessimistic? And the technical question, how many votes minimum the party must gather in order to recoup the deposit?
Okay, well, the guy who ran this piece, I think he actually... I think there were 2 or 3 areas where he got something a little bit wrong, and this was one of them. And we had a discussion about it later. He misunderstood what I said in this area. What I basically said was that it didn't matter whether or not we retained our deposits. which is, there's a bit of there's a nuance there, I know. But we're very much in the game at the moment about raising public consciousness about men's issues. And so I said, look, if we lose our deposits, so what? It's £1,500. We'd rather we didn't, but it is just so unimportant. I couldn't exaggerate. So success for us at the general election is not going to be about winning the seats or saving deposits. It's about standing. It's about the millions of people. I think normally between 8 and 10 million people watch the results coming in the late hours of election day and the early hours of the next morning. And for the first time, they will see three candidates standing for this bizarre thing called men's rights, and a lot of those will check us out. So that's going to be the success, and that has nothing to do with votes. I mean, we are going to work very hard to get every damn vote we can, and we'll be tramping the streets 7 days a week, over the next 3 or 4 months. But the deposit, it's neither here nor there. And in terms of how many votes we need to gather to recoup the deposit, it's 5% of the votes, so probably something between 2,000 and 3,000 votes a constituency, something like that.
I see. Okay. And the last question in my little list in here, which is harshly political in nature. Essentially, in September this year, we've covered this on this show at the time. The UK Independence Party has announced its full support for 50-50 shared parenting after divorce. Would you consider, in the constituencies where J4MB doesn't have its own candidate, throwing some sort of support for UKIP in this regard? Why or why not?
No, I don't think we will. There's a long history of major parties in opposition promising things like shared parenting, full access and so on, and they always renege on that once in power. So, it's not a game we're going to play. Plus, I mean, of the major parties, UKIP is probably the most meritocratic. So, for example, Nigel Farage, the leader, is on record as saying that that he would stop positive discrimination for women in areas like, well, I think in general he would be against that, and I think that is the man. But it's not, they aren't a men's rights party, and we have very little common. Their areas are sort of EU membership, immigration, and so on. And we have so little common ground. I think it would be regarded as cynical if we even tried to exploit their current support. Quite frankly, and so we just won't do it. I see. Although to expand on your point on meritocratic party, UKIP is also the only political party that doesn't have that stupidity called all women shortlists and whatnot. Well, no, that's not quite true, Lucia. The only party that currently has them is the Labour Party, but the other parties have flirted with it, and in fact, it was when David Cameron announced his intention to introduce them in 2009 for the Conservative Party. I resigned my membership that day, as did many others, and I started on the road to where I am today. So, but there is still talk of it. But no, the other parties have kind of have just shied away. But the Labour Party, is the feminist party in the country. There's no doubt about it.
I see. Well, these were essentially all the questions that I have. Jon, if you have some other questions, feel free to join. Although I see you already join whenever you wanted to say something.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, what I want to know is, what is your long-term plan with this party? I mean, in the short term, it seems like your plan is to go after marginal constituencies and try to nudge the other parties, which I think is a very sound plan. Yep. But what is your long-term plan?
The longer-term plan is to field enough candidates, enough potential MPs, that the major parties will need to engage with us to deter us from attacking them. So at the moment, it doesn't really matter whether we attack Conservative. So we're contesting 2 Conservative MPs and 1 Labour MP, but that's kind of academic. But at future elections, and I don't quite know when we'll get there, but we damn well will get there. Let's say we have 50 or 100 candidates, and we can say to the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, if you do not reverse your direction of travel with regard to policies affecting men, then we will stand against you in those 50, 60, 100 constituencies. And so there will be the real threat. I'm utterly convinced of this. We will be able to seriously threaten major parties with not retaining or not attaining power. And boy, is that going to hit some front pages. The stuff we've seen in the last 10 days is going to seem like chicken feed in comparison. We will get there. I mean, I'm committed to doing this until I'm 2030, when I'll be 72. I mean, probably not as party leader, I guess, by then, but who knows? But no, it will happen. I mean, I really, I think there's a historical inevitability about this. It will happen. Well, I'm not sure I can say much more than that. Yes, it's going to happen. When it's going to happen, I'm not going to put any bets on, but we will get to that point at some point.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I do think that's a sound plan, and one that's actually realistic and can actually be achieved in the UK political system.
Yes.
Because I mean, overall, it's really tough for small parties there.
It is, well, because we have first past the post. But the challenge, of course, is different in every country. And I'm honestly amazed that in 2015 I'm leading the only men's human rights political party in the world. I just every morning I wake up and think, why are there not 20?
Well,
I think there's one in Austria.
There's one in Austria and
right.
another one in Switzerland.
No, there is. You're quite right. But I said English speaking.
Oh, sorry.
No. But no, you're quite right. Why is there not one? And I keep saying this, but I'll say it again. One of the things that because we had a couple of campaigns before we formed the party, the Anti-Feminism League and the Campaign for Merit in Business. But within hours of announcing that we'd launched a political party and we had a clear strategy as to how we were going to change things, donations came in. And we had a donation, I remember, from a guy in London who said, look, I've been following you for the best part of 2 years. I think what you're doing is great, but this is practical and this might lead to something. Here's £200. And it opens the door to donations. It is and the lack of donations is the number one problem. Not the number. It is a big problem for men's rights advocates, and why people are not launching these things across the world. I just don't get. And I know the UK is probably a good place because it's a very small place for a start, so that kind of helps. What can I say? I remain optimistic that at some point there'll be 50 parties around the world.
Yeah, and it's as Jon said, it's quite a sound and realistic plan. Essentially, get the mainstream to fear you and listen to your demands, which are for the most part not unreasonable at all and not extremist at all. I mean, yeah, sure, you and I can disagree on a couple of things, but for the most part, most of what I've seen in the party's manifesto is just damn right common sense.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been 5 minutes over time, so unless you have some final thoughts, Mike, I think we should call it a night.
No, I'm good. Thanks for the discussion. Very good.
All right, and then if you're listening to us and you live in the Nottingham area in the United Kingdom, please make sure to vote for Justice for Men and Boys, or else I'll come down there and be mad at you. And no, I'm not joking. I'll come down there and be mad at you if you don't vote for J4MB if you live in the Nottingham area. And with that being said, I guess we can call it a night.
Sorry, Lucian. Can I just say one thing?
Please do.
Just very quickly. I'll be putting out a crowdfunder probably in the next week or so for some campaign materials. We're basically, I mean, we have a thing in the UK that the Royal Mail delivers at no cost for political parties an item of campaign literature in the last couple of weeks before the general election. Now we want to have a piece, a bit of literature which is A3 size. I don't know if this means anything to you guys, but it's basically sort of two A4 size. And on one side we're going to have a picture of a man saying goodbye to his son. It's absolutely heart-wrenching. And it's the text is something like, "Goodbye, son. Try and be a good lad," and it just gets you in the guts. And on the other side, we'll have an address to voters and so on. Now that's going to cost about £5,000, and so in the next week or two, I'm going to do a crowdfunder for that. But that will mean, I mean, we're already putting out many thousands of bits of literature, but the £5,000 will pay for that bit of literature to go into 110,000 households in that 2 weeks before the election, and it's about 170 or 172,000 electors, and that is going to be. I mean, it'll be at the point in time that people kind of say, right, this means something to me, because we are the only party in the English-speaking world that is standing up for fathers, standing up for men who are battered by partners, who stand, all this stuff. So I just wanted to mention that it could be something that makes a serious difference in the number of votes we get, and perhaps even save our deposits. Who knows? It'd be nice to save that £1,500.
Yes, definitely. And it's a nice thing with this one, with the Royal delivering it at no cost. It's a very nice, it's a nice gimmick. I've never heard it before in other countries. Okay, the next show on the frequencies of AVFM radio will be tomorrow, which I think is going to be a Tales from the Infrared with Dean Esme and the crowd of nerds in there. Our next show will be next Friday, January 30. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next Friday, but we'll definitely be here. And with that being said, Jon, final thoughts?
Take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.
This has been a production of A Voice for Man. Lucian Wilson and his guests, thank you for listening to The Voice of Europe. A Voice for Men radio is not corporate media, and everything runs on donations. So please consider visiting avoiceformen.com and make a donation. We would also like to thank the artists De Primatera, Mbezna, Cristian Buica, the Iranian band Arsames, the DDG Project, and all the other artists that offered us their songs to use under Creative Commons license. Special thanks go to www.pacdv.com/sounds for putting the sounds of the jingles at our disposal. We would also want to remind the listeners to take the red pill. Thank you for listening to us and have a great evening. Ați ascultat Vocea Europei.